It's actually way harder. I don't think our cold opens have ever been particularly funny anyway, but it's even harder to come up with something when you I don't want to give it away yet what it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Welcome to Your Inner Child is an Idiot. This is the podcast where we look back on things from our childhood, see if they were any good to begin with. My name is DJ.
And I'm Damon.
Welcome.
Thank you. And how are you doing on this wonderful insert nearest holiday?
No one wants to hear us. Small talk. Damon, let's get to business.
That's not what the survey said.
Speaking of, Damon's referring to our listener survey. If you want to click on the thingy below, I don't know, people to listen to podcasts in the air. It's not, you got to go to whatever you're listening to. There's a link there. It'll take you to the podcast. And you can get our 2023 recap, which by now was a while ago, but it's a fun extra episode.
Now, when we're recording, it was a while ago, and by the time you're listening to it, it's even at least 0.25 whiles longer than it is now.
I'm telling you now, I'm about 4, maybe 5 seconds from wilding.
That's dumb to me.
That's so stupid. But so is the song. So, okay, listen.
Yeah.
This is what we're going to talk about today.
Wait, is this the game? Are you playing the game now?
What we're going to talk about today, which the listeners all know, so I'm going to snap to it, okay? I'm going to make you guess pretty soon. It's an allegory, okay?
Okay, the movie is an allegory, or a show, or a video game, or song.
It's a metaphor for the struggles of different...
Watership Down.
Different kinds of people.
Okay. Animal Farm.
There's different kinds of struggles that it's been linked to. You might relate to one of them more than the other.
Oh my God, of course. Is it X2, X-Men United?
No, but you're right in the ballpark. This is maybe something you'd watch on Saturday morning, right before American Gladiators came on.
Is it just X-Men, the cartoon?
Yes, X-Men, the animated series from the 90s. And you can probably guess why I want to cover this.
Because of X-Men '97.
There's a new series out, and I want to watch it, but I want you, the listener, to listen to me talk about watching it more than anything. And so we're going to cover X-Men, the animated series in the 90s.
Have you watched the new one?
No, I can't yet. We got to do it.
I guess I'm curious because it's X-Men 97. It's set in 97, so I'm curious how much the hits of Edwin McCain are going to play into the plot.
Slow-mo.
Well, that's what I'm curious about. Or maybe there's a big Godzilla promotion going on.
Matthew Broderick voices Jubilee in this series. I like the idea that Jubilee is her pyrotechnic powers are exploding in slow motion, and it's "and I'll be your crying shoulder," Wolverine slowly schnickting
to "My Heart Will Go On" by Celine Dion. That's what they do if they weren't cowards. I'll tell you that.
I mean, we'll find out. What do you remember about this X-Men the Animated Series?
I remember that they were lucky if I stayed through the theme song. I didn't watch this show. I didn't watch this show as a kid. It would come on, at least in my region of the country, it would come on after probably Animaniacs, and then I'd be like, oh, X-Men's on. This is for someone else. What I didn't realize is what I meant is Straight Boys. So I would just turn it off. I knew enough that now that the theme song is kind of in its meme era currently, I know it enough that I recognize that theme right off.
And they quote it.
Someone
in the movies,
whistled it. Do they?
Yeah, so
I know they quoted it. Charles Xavier and Doctor Strange got a little motif.
Yeah, that's
of the X-Men
I guess
theme.
I don't know if they quoted it in the old movies. I meant in the when they were introducing. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
When they were like, "You want to still stick with the Marvel movies? We got X-Men now. You still want to?"
Yeah, but
guys,
they've had the rights to X-Men for 6 years. I'm like, guys, you've been looking for something to bring people back together, and you have it, and it's just sitting there.
It's just so hard. We're already 22 movies ahead of our schedule. We're still working on the movies for 2049.
They're like,
when Doctor Strange 6 comes out.
They're like, we really got to figure out how to introduce the Fantastic Four. Who's waiting on that? I know there are people, but it's not me.
There are.
I don't care about the Fantastic Four. Am I going to watch it?
They're due for a good movie sometime, right?
Yeah.
If all the multiverses happen, there has to be one where there's a good Fantastic Four movie, right?
I just want a Fantastic Four movie that's good before
Fantastic More. That's
Fantastic
the sequel
More.
to Fantastic Four.
Fantastic Four 2, Fantastic More. All I want is for Vin Diesel to play the Silver Surfer. That's all I want.
Because he's already bald, so you don't have to spend all that money getting a haircut.
This is like when we do that.
You don't have to. That's where a lot of money goes. A lot of people don't know is getting the hair just right.
That's what when we do our Wizard magazine wish casting. You got to pick bald guys.
You just have to pick. Yeah, there's no other way to get a person with a clean scalp. You just have to find a guy who already has it.
We should get that guy who played Powder. Sorry, I don't know who that character was.
Apparently, the editor of Wizard magazine.
The Bostonian.
Get Powder in here. Where's Powder?
The Bostonian who really likes the movie Powder from 1995.
But not enough to learn the actor's name. Where the fuck is Powder?
Susan Powder, can we get her? She's not bald, but
I want to stay on a theme. Powder. Or someone named Dusty, if we can find them. First off, Powder, Dusty, any other synonyms after that? Is Grainy a name?
Foggy? No, that's not close enough.
Granule? Guys, that's like a Slavic name, right?
Yes. Sorry. I was trying to think of something else and talk at the same time, and I got nothing else.
To answer your question, I am not familiar much with this show. I do remember I watched part of the beginning of one episode, and the president was like delivering an address, and the president was a woman.
What?
Can you even imagine? No, I still can't, X-Men 97.
Would that I could.
Would that I could.
I loved this. I think there couldn't have been a more well-timed cartoon for me because I was like super into comics. Always loved Saturday morning cartoons. I think this and Ninja Turtles were like the most. I mean, no, Ninja Turtles was a little earlier, but I still love the Ninja Turtles. But it's just
Ninja Turtles were created in a lab to just drill into our little soft boy heads.
Yeah. But I love the X-Men, and I had a bunch of like the action figures. I had posters. I collected comics. And I was excited because somewhat recently, this animated series came out on streaming. And so I was like, sweet, it's time to revisit this.
I imagine, by the way, you were alone in your living room and you went, sweet. Now we can revisit this.
I'm like scrolling my phone. I'm like, yes.
Honey, what was that? Nothing.
Nothing, darling.
Nothing, darling. As you take another sip on your martini. Now you said you were into comics. Were you into X-Men specifically? I'm sure we talked about this during the various X-Men movies we've already watched.
Always loved X-Men. And my friend Justin and I, shout out to Justin Stevens, hello. We used to make fun of X-Men because they'd always have like enormous blocks of text. And so I'm not sure I got all of it as far as like allegories and stuff. I don't think it's like that deep. It's just a little.
You didn't pick up on the queer subtext in X-Men when you were reading in 1994.
And I think some of that, and it depends on what the run of issues is and what we're talking about. But like some of that is a little overstated. It's a little clunky because it's like comic books, which I still love and respect. They are often fairly clunky when they try to be heady. And I think X-Men falls into that too. And I think the cartoon definitely does too, because I went back to try to rewatch this and I'm a little scared to do this run through because it was kind of hard to watch at first. I didn't really give it the old college try. So we're going to do that for these episodes, but I'm thinking maybe it might be a little rough in parts.
Interesting. I am also, I know I should have said this earlier, I'm having a sudden memory like Madam Web or some other character like that.
Your mother was in the...
She was killed in the Amazon while researching spiders.
For X-Men.
But I'm having a sudden memory when I was in college. One of our professors, Dr. Kelly Hall, she did a short, like one-off lecture at the Social Justice Center, Liberal Arts Education. And she did a short lecture on queer subtext in X-Men comics. And I remember, I think this was like maybe sandwiched betwixt the first X-Men movie and the second, but I remember being kind of into it and maybe giving comics longer shrift than I usually do.
Oh, okay. All right.
So a shout out to Dr. Kelly Hall.
Good job.
For her passion for queer subtext in X-Men comics.
I did a little bit of pre-research, and I found episodes that I'd like us to watch.
Pre-search.
I will send these to you because I don't want you to have to remember them. But for our listeners, here's what we're going to watch. We're going to watch, and we might not do both parts 1 and 2 of all. There's a lot of like serialized, like parts 1, 2, parts 1, 2, and 3, et cetera, et cetera. We may not do if we don't feel like we have to finish the story, but it's, they're like 22 minutes. We'll probably just watch all these. But the series,
they just wash over you, really.
The series begins with Night of the Sentinels, part 1 and 2.
I know them from the other movies.
I think that's really important that we watch that for bookends later. And then Days of Future Past, parts 1 and 2. You may remember.
I know that from the movie named the same.
And that's from the comics as well. Days of Future Past was a very popular run or like storyline. Then we're in the season 2. There's Till Death Do Us Part, parts 1 and 2. And then that's involves Mr. Sinister, who I believe is going to come. I've just seen stills. I believe he's going to come back in.
Is that his given name? Is that his legal name, Mr. Sinister?
You know, the weird thing is he's a minister, and it's
Come on,
it's not
Minister
funny.
Sinister.
It's not funny, Damon. Minister Sinister.
I loved Serious DJ. It's not funny.
It's not funny, Damon.
Wait until you see what Minister Sinister does.
This joke I just made is not funny. That's just true, generally. So there was also the Dark Phoenix saga.
Oh, Dark Phoenix. I also have heard that the movie adaptation of that isn't very good.
Bad.
Either version of the Dark Phoenix saga.
It is a very interesting and popular storyline in the comic books that they have not done well, except for a lot of people say this run in the original X-Men the Animated Series. Unfortunately for you, it is 4 parts. So we're going to be watching the Dark Phoenix saga parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then there's a couple that we can choose between. There's Nightcrawler, which obviously introduces Nightcrawler. And then there's Weapon X, Lies, and Videotape, which talks more about Wolverine's origin story, which you've already seen.
You can't just put a sex, lies, and videotape reference in a kid's show. Even tweens are going to be like, what's that now?
I just remember even now seeing that and being like, that's a weird title. And then only now saying it out loud, I was like, I see.
I get it now. What about the Chinese restaurant where Cyclops and Jubilee are just waiting? The entire episode, they're just in the lobby of a Chinese restaurant waiting for a table. That's a fun episode, right?
You're doing great at taking the mutant registration. You're just taking registrations down.
Anyone can take it.
I need you to hold the mutants.
Classic Cyclops impression.
And then we're doing, of course, the last episode, Graduation Day, which I do believe will be important for X-Men 97.
The inevitable Patreon episode we do on X-Men 97.
That's how we get you. We want you to sign up for our Patreon page, but we're only going to talk about X-Men 97 on our Patreon page. So you can watch that and watch along with us. So we're going to watch X-Men the Animated Series. Those episodes will be back in a sec.
LT shared a video with me, which even pushed me to my limit, which was someone had dressed their Frenchie Bulldog in a hoodie, and then they had slipped their, arms into the sleeves.
You watched a video.
They opened up a peanut
abuse,
butter. Yeah. They opened up the peanut butter and then stuck a spoon in it, and then the Frenchie, which already has the, was like. And I was like, okay, this is 3 minutes of just the mouth sounds. It's not even raising the stakes to a punchline. It's just a dog dressed as a human, sorta, and eating peanut butter.
Don't like it.
I still gave it a heart emoji, though.
You're very generous with those.
But still commented that I didn't care for the mouth sounds, which is saying something, because I usually like mouth sounds.
Okay, well, we can get into that later. We don't have time.
We're chock-a-block with X-Men episodes.
What was your idea?
Am I just starting it? I'm just going to pull a DJ and just spring it on you. Hi, everyone. This is, of course, Damon, who usually does our Patreon episodes or Patreon commercials. I'm already doing great at it because I always do it, and so I'm used to it. We're doing a pledge drive of sorts. If we get enough patrons this episode, we are going to graft DJ Skeleton with adamantium. We're going to put him in a tube, which is the proper way you graft people's skeletons. It's going to be filled with indecipherable liquid, And then we're just going to, I guess, inject the molten metal into his bones. He already has claws, so it'll just graft onto those. That was like a retcon later, but it just makes sense when you think about it.
It's kind of like the dunk tank.
We're also going to comb his hair down the middle, and then he's going to have these little fins, and then Beast is going to see it, and he's going to be like, that's kind of nice.
I'm even going to do the spit curl on front, just like you.
Let's be friends, Wolverine. This devolved real quick, but just go to patreon.com/your inner child is an idiot.
It's basically the dunk tank of Patreon. It's just...
That's how it happens. Wolverine was a gym teacher at a local middle school, got sent in the dunk tank. It went straight to Colonel Strikers.
Sure.
And got shot up with various made-up medals.
It's like, you know, I don't want to be the target of this, but I mean, like, it's for a good cause, so I'll do it.
We're raising money. What was that you said, Greg? Proud Boys.
Oh shit.
No. Wait, no, don't throw that ball, Brayden.
Love it. Welcome back. We are back. We watched X-Men, the animated series. We watched...
The entirety of it, it felt like?
We watched
Was that correct?
a bushel of eps. I'll tell you that much.
I believe in Canada they are called a raft of eps when you get this many X-Men episodes at once.
Let's get into it. We watched lots of X-Men.
Do you want to run down the X-Men eps?
Yeah, just as a reminder, we watched X-Men. So this is season 1, episodes 1 and 2, which is Night of the Sentinels 1 and 2. And then we watched, let's just do it piecemeal. So do you want to talk about those?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was like, what does that mean in this equation? What does piecemeal mean?
I don't know.
As opposed to our usual fluid discussion.
Well, so I'll recap these two. So this is sort of our entry into the X-Men through the eyes of Jubilee. She's a Jubilation Lee. You may know her Christian name.
I also, not to get off topic immediately, but to get off topic immediately, I realized in the last episode we watched that I thought that Magneto's name was Eric Lensher, but in this, his name was Magnus.
Yeah.
I was like, come on, his name is Magnus and he has magnet powers?
You might be discovering something about early comic books, especially.
Wait, was his name Magnus and then they changed it later, or is it the other way around?
This is going to be the first of many comic book questions, and I wanted to be better prepared for it, but I'm afraid that I don't know. It seems like...
Is Magneto an Omega level mutant?
I also don't know that, because it seems kind of arbitrary.
Yeah, I looked at a Wikipedia page.
It seems like it depends on who's writing it and how powerful they want the mutant to be. There was a whole thing where Apocalypse gave people extra powers. Like Iceman didn't used to be a mega level mutant. Then at one storyline he became one, and then I'm like, is he still one? I don't know.
Don't worry, it won't come up again.
All I know is that he got spiky with ice instead of just being able to.
That's what got him to Omega level?
No, it was I think a side effect.
Also, I mean, don't shoot your wad by naming the level Omega. Because you're in the middle of it. You can't see the forest for the trees. Don't just start naming levels of mutants. You don't know. What if an already Omega level mutant gets, boom, up a level, gets enough experience points, gets to go up a level. Yeah. He chooses attack power over magic or defense. And what do you call him then? Alpha?
Extra Omega.
Oh, they would, though. That's so what they would do.
So Jubilee is a teen
Thank you.
Who's coming into her mutant powers, which are fireworks.
It seems like we're just destroying electronics. It seems to be how it really
That's how it
displays
manifests.
itself.
There's a mutant control agency that's been sort of assembled to monitor mutant activities, but instead they send giant destructive sentinel robots, which is these massive, stupid-looking robots that chase our
giant
heroes.
sentinels who have just the softest footsteps. You won't even notice they're right behind you,
Yeah,
despite them being 300 feet tall.
We're not when we're in the middle of a recap, but when we're out of that, I want to talk a lot about the sneaking.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Yep, I'm sorry.
Through Jubilee's eyes, we meet the X-Men, which are at this point it's Jean Grey, Cyclops, Wolverine, Gambit, Rogue, and Storm, and Beast, and Dr. X, Dr. Xavier. That's it, right? And Morph. I forgot Morph. So with Jubilee, they become 10. She's having, she's kind of coming into her own mutant powers, and that's difficult for her adoptive parents who don't know what to do. Have you tried not being a mutant? that's more for the movie.
So they did what any concerned parent would do, which is sign her up for a government registration that's rounding up all the mutants.
As we know, you're pro this activity.
True. We'll get into my feelings on the Mutant Registration Act. I think Senator Kelly makes some fine points.
At some point, they do break into a facility to... What are they trying to do? I can't remember.
Thank you. They break into several facilities over the course of the episodes we watch, and sometimes it's hard to keep track of what government facility they're breaking into. This one, I think, is where they're building... Yeah, they're building the Sentinels.
They're trying to see... So they're worried that, the Sentinels...
Sentinel City, they call it.
Their Sentinels are going to be out of control. They're just giant robots that can do a lot of things that are sometimes very difficult to defeat and sometimes very easy to defeat. And... During the course of that, they are sort of ambushed, and Beast is captured, and Morph is seemingly killed. Seemingly.
Morph, my favorite character I knew existed before
Asterisk.
this moment.
That's basically it. Does a mall baby eat chili fries?
Yeah.
That's my first question. Yes?
We criticized Storm in the X-Men movie for having the worst line of that movie. I gotta hand it to Storm, who is like writing iambic pentameter sonnets while just trying to control the means of the earth. But she's always like, she first off calls herself in the third person. She's like, Storm, mistress of the skies. I'm like, just do it.
Yeah.
Stop talking about it and do the thing.
The bad guys are like slowly punching me. Like, are you...
Is it rude to attack her now, or do I have to hang back?
Should I wait until she's done? It's such a beautiful little soliloquy. I don't want to interrupt.
But I also I'm being paid by the hour.
Yeah, we got.
I don't get time and a half. I need to get this done.
Got to get this movie. I got other henching to do.
I don't work just for one evil villain. I've got several. It's a hustle culture out here in henchmen.
I'm a freelance hencher.
I've got several. Freelance hencher.
This is 1099. That's 1099 work. The hench.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I remember even as a kid being like annoyed with that. With Storm's way of speaking, her way of... Because her powers are pretty cool. Like the ability to control the elements. They're a little nebulous. They're like wind, and it's not as cool as like someone just blasting. But it's a very powerful power. And in the movies, it seems like she has to be outside. But in this show, it seems like she can do whatever she wants.
She can be in a mall.
But yeah, she can't just do she can't just lightning bolt a bad guy. She's got to be like, I am strong, also known as Aurora Monroe. And my cousin's name is Kelly, and I can do... Yeah.
This is from a later episode, but this was my favorite because it was so... I was like, did she just say what I think she said? She said, the Arctic wind will cool their ardor. And I'm like, okay, ardor? That's not really a word you scream just because of the clumsiness of the vowel R combos. It just seemed... I was like, did she say ardor? I couldn't catch it.
It does seem... I can imagine wanting to work your poetry into your work. She's got the kind of job.
For her perspective, I feel bad for all her coworkers.
Sure.
Would you like to hear another one I wrote about the wind? No, please, God, no, Aurora.
Will it make you summon the wind and help us? Then I guess.
Because we're in the middle of a real hailstorm of henchmen over here.
So what did you think? This is your introduction to these characters in animated form. How did you feel about this? Okay.
Okay, so it was a little clumsy, but I feel like that's
J'accuse.
It was a little clunky at times. That's a phrase I'm probably going to say a lot, but I gave it the benefit of the doubt because it was the first episode. It was very interesting. They started out real big, which I feel like because I'm more familiar with the movies arc, I was surprised by Sentinel heavy this entire series is. Like, Sentinels are there from the get-go, which it took us like 5 X-Men movies just to see a damn Sentinel. And here they were. I mostly remember their design from the X-Men versus Capcom video game.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was just the X-Men beat 'em up arcade game. Sentinels are really heavy in that. Sentinels, the problem with Sentinels is they're colored much like Magneto, so they just sort of look like a bloated Magneto who's like, because their mouth is always open in a weird shape. So I always, for some reason, associate Sentinels with Magneto, despite the fact that they are not related. In fact, by coincidence, almost all the episodes we watched this time are Magneto light.
Yes. Yeah, we didn't get a lot of Magneto, and that's just the episodes we selected.
That's just the luck of the draw with X-Men.
Yeah.
I was interested. I was a little curious because I wanted to know what everyone's powers were. And I think because this is formulated almost like a soap opera in that the story just keeps going as the episodes evolve, they did sort of take their time with that, which I can respect. But I was sort of like, what's Gambit's power, though? Because they just kept throwing things and they exploded. And I was like, what's the power? He has cards and that's the power? How does that manifest itself when you're a teenager? And then I think I picked up, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, when he touches something, it becomes explosive.
Yeah, he can
charge if he pulls his cards out, he can flick it and it's basically a bomb.
He can charge any object with kinetic energy, quote unquote, according to that, but which doesn't really make sense. According to the comics. But
I mean, kinetic energy is active energy, so if he's filling it with kinetic energy, it is by definition potential energy. I wasn't a science kid, but I did pick up some stuff. But why didn't they teach us how to do our taxes?
Why did they teach us about these X-Men powers?
Right. This is what's really coming into my life that I could really learn.
This is a small complaint, but one that comes throughout the series is the amount of explosiveness seems to vary. And maybe he can control that, but it's not really clear. Like sometimes he throws a card, like the same object. Sometimes he throws a card and it blows up the whole room or a sentinel. And then sometimes it is a very small explosion that just kind of like makes people scatter.
And sometimes he bumps into a pine tree.
Unconscious.
And it explodes.
Yeah. I'm headcanon saying that he can control the amount of explosive, how much energy he...
Fair enough. And what makes his eyes weird?
Yeah, so there are like passive and active mutant traits. So like his eyes being, I don't know if that's what they're called in the canon, but they're...
The whites of his eyes, for lack of a better term, are black, and his pupils are red.
You can say the blacks of his eyes if you want to be like that.
Don't shoot him until you see the blacks of his eyes. I know it sounds confusing, but trust me, it'll make sense once he gets close enough. Oh, you know who's fucking on my nerves in this episode? Beast. I really thought I would connect with Beast the most because I knew going in that Beast was very intellectual, but instead he's just fucking exhausting every time he's quoting Robert Frost or Alfred Lord Tennyson. And I'm like, Beast, not now. Also, and I can tell you from experience, knowing quotes from things actually doesn't equate to being smart. It just means you have a lot of time on your hands.
I always thought that I wanted to reject the notion that reading constantly is really that much better than any other form of entertainment that you take in, be it video games or television or movies. I do think you may pick up some more language skills from reading, but it's just a way of learning and entertaining yourself, just as certain television programs can be. Like not every book is going to expand your mind. Not every television show is going to rot your brain. You know what I mean? It's just... The thing is not good, but I think there's a lot more emphasis on the intelligence of being well read, and in his case, not having any original thoughts from that, but rather quoting constantly.
Just quoting constantly. I do appreciate that, DJ, that you are able to take hot takes. I am pro mutant registration. You are anti-book. Welcome to the podcast, everyone.
I think we'll see as history shakes out which of those is worse.
I did have a question in this episode, and I think they eventually dropped this.
Both involve burning books, which is weird. Anyway, sorry.
I noticed that Wolverine's claws glow in this. Wait, glowed in this? Is that
in the first episode?
Yeah, but I think they drop it eventually. But I wrote it down here. I was like, "Is that mean something else?" It was like, and then they were blue.
Here's something that I think we're going to get into in the big points is just animation consistency. There isn't much. So I think that's more what that is. I think that, especially the first episode, I mean, it's miles above where we end up in the series in season 5, but it is rough around the edges, and that does get better. But not
there is like a bell curve that happens. I feel like it does get better. One of the things animation wise that I noticed in the first season episodes that we watched was that the backgrounds had this sketchy quality that I was very curious about, because you'd see like, Rogue do one of her Southern style flips past a building or something. And you would notice like the windows were just sort of, the lines from, marking the windows would extend past. Like it was very like sketchy, like here's where the window is. And at first I was like, that's a very interesting choice. And I was kind of into it. And then the more I watched it, I was like, I don't like it. I wish it was sketchier, or I wish it was cleaner. But it felt like in this weird middle ground where it just looked like a mistake. But that eventually got cleaned up in season 2 on. But it was an interesting choice in season 1. It felt like it would have to be conscious to do, but I feel like they could have made it more definitive or not.
Yeah, I don't think it was a conscious choice. There's legend of how much they had to battle with the animation house, which I don't remember the name of, and I don't want to besmirch their name, but there was like, they were almost going to fire them because they kept getting animation mistakes that they refused to fix, and things were late and colors didn't match, and you can see a lot of those things they fixed, quote unquote, some of them. And then when you look at, there's like Wolverine's mask will just be yellow. This is something we saw a lot like in He-Man, where it's just like a cheaper cartoon where things are a little herkier, jerkier, and there's a lot of character, like the syncing of the voice. It's like Sabretooth's mouth is moving, but Wolverine's voice is coming out. That happened.
I caught that in, I think, that same episode that you're maybe referencing, the much later episode where at one point Wolverine is
I think that those things happen throughout. I do think it's a little up and down. I do agree with you. The bell curve, it gets better. And what was like season 3, it's 3 and 4 is kind of the best as far as quality of animation. Or maybe I'm thinking of late season 2. I don't remember the seasons at this point.
No, I feel like once you get to season 2 up until the end of season 4, as far as I can tell, it looked pretty consistent. And then we can talk about the drop off in season 5. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I also don't want to bash him too hard. I think there's 2 factors going in here. It's a very ambitious style. It's a very true to the comic books as far as I know. It looks very much in a comic book style, while also probably getting the budget that something like Animaniacs or Tiny Toon Adventures would have to animate. And those same mistakes happen a lot. Yeah. I think when you were doing everything hand-drawn, it was very easy for those mistakes to go in. And then once they were there, we were like, well, we could spend thousands of dollars fixing it for this 1.5 second shot, or we can just put it out. I mean, it's fucking 8-year-olds, dude. To quote the Big Lebowski in a different context. And so, I mean, I don't want to bash them too hard. The problem, though, is because of this style, the herky-jerkiness and sometimes the shortcuts are very apparent. Yeah. And especially the dramatic heft sometimes of the storylines and the dialogue can be really undercut by the emotions the animation shows. Me and Tyler were watching Weapon X Lies and Videotape, a very odd movie to reference in a children's show as a show title. But we kept redoing our favorite poses when people would be doing these sort of big poses. We'd be like, no, Wolverine, stop. Because they were just so awkward. Yeah. And I feel like everything was done at the same speed. So when you would actually be trying to stop someone, you would move really quick. But in this, it's like, I'm going to move at the same speed as I do when walking to stop you, thrust my weight in front of you. Or when people are being thrown, it's sort of like in the same style. I think speed is very hard to convey in animation. More goofy cartoons get a shortcut in that they can bend and twist and pull these shapes to make them look like Yakko Warner is running faster than usual. But in a more realistic cartoon like this, where there's a man named Wolverine wearing yellow spandex, realism, it can look a lot clunkier than those goofier cartoons. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Did you have more to say about Beast? You want to say?
Oh no! I mean, I complained about him while he was gone. What was the one I sent you that was so annoying?
Lord Tennyson.
Hold on, I'm gonna find it. People are gonna love this. Security. Are any of us truly secure? Like, I think that's because Rogue asked him to shut down security, and he just says that. I'm like, shut up and do it. And I did appreciate. There are a lot of like 80s action film one-liners in this. Yeah, I'm sure you've got a plethora of them, but. At one point, Wolverine is fighting a sentinel And this felt like it was created. This line feels very like AI generated. He just goes, "Hey, Tin Woodsman, I'm sending you back to Oz
In peace.
in pieces." I'm like, what are you talking about? Just attack him or not? Why would you say this to a Sentinel that doesn't seem to be processing what you're saying? And also the Tin Woodsman, well, in the book, actually, he chops off all his arms and legs.
Wolverine's a reader too.
He slowly replaces them with tin. But I don't feel like he's referencing that. I feel like he's referencing probably the more integrated movie language that we saw in 1939's Wizard of Oz. But hey, he's Canadian, so he's probably got better education than we do.
That's true.
I did have to tell Tyler that Wolverine is canonically short.
Yes.
And he went, oh. That was another thing about the animation. That's why I told Tyler that Wolverine was canonically short, because Tyler kept getting confused by proportions in this show. And this is a consistent problem, even into like second, third, fourth seasons, where people are running down hallways. And again, I'm not bashing them. That's hard to do, to have a character literally grow when you're hand animating it.
Yeah.
But, they'd start down at the end of the hallway like 12 feet tall because they're brushing their head against the edge of the doorway. And then they'd slowly come into frame like slightly shorter. And it was awkward at times. And especially when people are various sizes, where Juggernaut is 12 feet tall and Wolverine's, 5'6". It's like, how big is anyone? Beast might say. Are any of us truly tall?
A minor poet for a minor obstacle, which, wow, rude.
Oh, I did want to talk about the Sentinels' light footsteps.
Oh, yeah. So they show them constantly just destroying everything while just walking around. Like, they're these
just
enormous...
rubbing up against like a bear on a tree, like just rubbing their bodies against the building for some reason.
When their initial purpose is to track mutants, and of course they've been repurposed to capture some mutants, and then of course at some point later on they're actually going to begin, this is later in the season, they begin tracking humans and mutants. They're just used to control the general population regardless of their status. And in this episode, or these two episodes, they show them just walking down the street. As they're just walking, they're smashing trees, and every time they step, there's sidewalks. But then they also show them just literally hiding. One is hiding behind a building. In the shadows.
That's Greg the Sentinel. He's the fun one.
Rogue.
He's the fun one.
His Rogue like flies by, and it's just like, she does not see it. It's purple and red.
It's a purple humanoid robot who's 300 feet tall.
I've noticed that the Sentinel's character design, and also later there's henchmen that work for the Hellfire Club that also, they both seem modeled on the crash test dummies, which were very big in the 90s.
That's
you had
true.
The commercials.
It was their world. We were just living in it.
I had a crash test dummies costume for Halloween one year. It was the same year.
Not the band.
No.
The crash test dummies from the funny commercial. Yeah.
Once there was this kid who got into it. Sorry.
Don't sing anymore.
Sorry.
Shh.
My intern is telling me I can't.
Unless you make it a parody, and then you can just do it as long as you want.
Right, Weird Al? Some of the character design is very weird. And oh my God, just total side note. Have you ever seen the infamous Sentinel action figure? It was a large action figure. I have to.
Based off the comics, or
I have
the what?
To show you this.
Oh. Is it kissing me? What is that mouth?
Rude.
What is that mouth?
Rude.
He also has got the gambit eyes.
See how it's weird? It's like V-shaped. The proportions are all weird.
He's very chest forward. He's got a cinched waist.
Cinching was very big in 1994.
Yeah, we were all wearing corsets and hoop skirts. And then he comes apart, which is kind of fun because he's a Sentinel.
This is a frustrating thing about this series is the Sentinel. They use them a lot, even in the episodes we watched.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there are more, but maybe we watched all the Sentinel episodes. But they come back in Days of Future Past, and then they come back again. And they're either extremely easy to defeat, or they're the most formidable thing that multiple X-Men can't, crack their armor. And it's very confusing because It's cool. I think either one is cool because like having hench robots or henchmen that they can just beat up while we wait for the big bad, that's cool. And then having these big formidable things that are really hard to defeat, they have to come up with clever ways to defeat them, like the troll, the cave troll in Lord of the Rings. Is that what I'm thinking of?
Maybe in Moria with the club and he's smashing things around. Yeah,
they have to come up with a clever way to defeat it.
It's kind of like the aliens in Alien versus the Alien and Alien versus the aliens in Alien. Like in the Alien, it's real hard to kill this one guy. And then in Aliens, they're just like, well, you just got this flamethrower and you just sort of shoot it at him.
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
What do you think about our friend Rogue? How do you feel about Rogue? What were your impressions of Rogue?
Again, like Rogue is very full of pathos in the 2000s movies, played by Anna Paquin, Oscar winner. Here she's just kind of talking like this, and I kind of like that she seems to have also nebulous powers. I mean, I know about she can take mutants' powers, she can fly because of that, and
I have an answer to that one.
Okay, and then in the episode where we're introduced to Nightcrawler, her sleeves conveniently get torn off during an avalanche, despite Gambit's clothes not being affected. And for some reason, when she's approached by humans, it makes her hear their thoughts.
If she's touched.
And then and she actually embodied their thoughts for a minute, and then it was never brought up again. And I was like, that must be something they've already established that I'm supposed to pick up on, but I don't know what that means. I made a little note, which you're seeing now, to ask you about it. So how does she fly?
Her actual mutant power that has manifested is she has the power to absorb the powers of other mutants. So
forever?
Well, no. Usually it's temporary, but in the case of Carol Danvers in the comics, that's sort of just happens before this in the animated series. Carol Danvers is, you may know her from the movies as Captain Marvel. So
I was going to say, okay, yeah. I was like, I know that name.
Yeah. So, or I can't remember if the Ms. Marvel, Captain Marvel, what I don't, in the comics, it confused me because I didn't really ever read that. But at some point, Rogue began as a reluctant bad guy, and she at some point is commanded to absorb the powers of Carol Danvers. We think at some point that Carol Danvers is dead, but Ms. Marvel or Captain Marvel has these basically Superman powers. She can kind of fly around. She's got super strength. She's very durable. And she
I've never heard Superman powers described as such. Oh, he's very durable.
He's very durable. I mean,
faster than a speeding bullet and very durable.
Could you find the lie in that, please?
I mean, that's true. I mean, oh no, you can move him around. You can sort of throw him against a wall. He won't chip. He won't crack. He won't stain. You can put a hot pot on him. He won't discolor. You're going to love this Superman. And if you prefer, Captain Marvel.
It's one of the many ways in which Superman and Captain Marvel are like the toters you get from the city for your trash. Very durable.
They're pretty durable, but eventually the truck will crush them, and you'll have to ask the city for another Superman.
Another Superman.
But that's years down the line.
So she does not actually kill Carol Danvers, which is what I couldn't remember if she did. But because she absorbs so much of her entity, and this happens sometimes, she'll take on, basically, Captain Marvel is another entity within her mind. And for a while, this is something that's explored in the comics a bit. And I don't know if none of the episodes other than what you mentioned really talk about this as far as Captain Marvel is concerned. Also, Captain Marvel's still alive, so it's not like, so her consciousness, I guess, is split.
I hope you never stop talking. It's just the more you talk, the more you sound completely unhinged.
Oh my God. So some of this stuff I don't remember, so I had to like look back up. And then if you start just reading what happens, because the Dark Phoenix saga, which we'll get to, which is bonkers enough in the cartoon, but if you go back to the comics, it is at least 10 times as bonkers, because
as we'll discuss, I accidentally watched the wrong Phoenix saga.
Yeah.
I watched the Light Phoenix saga, and I thought that was also bonkers.
Yeah.
And that's when my patience broke. But do you want to continue? Do you have any? Wait, can we talk about Jean Grey while we're still on?
Let's just keep going through characters, because we're introduced to most of them. We'll get more characters, but I don't want to spend forever on these first two episodes, but we do get to talk about characters, so then we can kind of move on. But Jean Grey is the most moaning of the superheroes.
Her special power is moaning when slightly uncomfortable.
Agonized moaning.
Also, her special power is losing the bet on who gets to have to wear her suit.
Ooh.
Like, you know,
Woof.
her suit is insane.
Yeah.
She is, first off, she's got the compartmentalized breasts,
Yep.
which is always a favorite in a super suit, because you definitely would want that if you had breasts.
Lift?
You'd want them sort of
Separate.
lifted, separated into metal tubes. And she also has this...
Boob tubes.
She has this sort of neck into head piece, which makes her look like a British mailbox, post box. And it reminds me of Michael Keaton's Batman helmet. Like, it feels like she's like in traction, like one of those things where it rests on your shoulders and it keeps your head in place so that you don't move too much. Like, that's what it looks like. And when I finally watched the Phoenix episodes that I watched alone, I was like, thank God they got her out. She's in the hospital at one point. I'm like, thank God. I'm sure she's real happy to be in the hospital because she doesn't have to wear that ridiculous outfit. And at one point she gets into her Phoenix garb and I was like, her hair looks great. Her outfit looks great. It looks like a lot more fun. Yeah. And then when I skipped ahead to the next episodes we were watching, she was back in the Jean Grey outfit. And I was like, ugh, you look terrible. She looks like she's halfway into like getting on her mummy costume for Halloween. She looks absolutely terrible. It's also flesh colored, so she also looks like she's a lot more skimpily dressed than she is, but it is the worst of these X-Men
It's the
outfits.
same.
It is ugly as sin.
She has the same tailor as Sabretooth, where they have at one point in the episode where Sabretooth, like, he takes off a glove, and I was like, he was wearing a glove? Like, how was that a glove? How much of this is glove and how much of this is
I know exactly what you're talking about because I wrote I think one of my few notes for that episode is, wait, Sabretooth chooses to wear this?
Yeah, so it's even worse, I think, is at some point she changes back to her original Jean Grey episode, which is not original to us in the animated series, but in the comics it was more similar to her original one, where she's got this mask that looks like a butterfly on her face.
Oh, I've seen that. I've seen that in like retro. Yeah. I was looking up Jean Grey and I found a poster where someone did every like incarnation of Jean Grey, and that was one of them, where it's like this butterfly mask, almost like a domino mask, but it extends past her head and it's butterfly shape.
Well, especially with the Phoenix entity, she is one of the more powerful mutants in this.
Omega level.
Yeah, but she is my least favorite in terms of, part of it is just the fact that it's telepathic, so she's always just sort of like putting her fingers on her temples like Professor X. Professor X is the same thing too, where it's just like, it's a lot of like agonized, and then like, and in the it's the same in every iteration. It's the same in comic books is, I guess, less bad because you don't hear the moaning, but there's always just like, they have to make it seem, I guess that's how they make it interesting. You know, this is very challenging, or they're trying to. It's very challenging to them. It's like, but Jean Grey, and the fact that she is a woman makes it worse because she seems like she's always like passing out, or like she's always hurt, and she's this extremely powerful mutant. And so it was kind of, there was something cool that I was hoping for with the Phoenix, but it's still, Jean Grey's still a victim in all this. Like, she's controlled by this other force. It's not even Jean Grey. So Jean Grey doesn't like get the credit for being the Phoenix. It's this other being, which I'm sure is a dude, isn't it?
Wow.
Aren't all Phoenixes?
Really into the gender binary for, I don't know, space entities?
Forces? Yeah. No, Jean Grey.
But not the Space Force that Trump invented.
Yeah. Right. Jean Grey is frustrating as a character because I want her to be more interesting.
Yeah, and I always forget about her, and because she's both in the movies and here, and she's like one of the core mutants, and I'm like, all right, and Jean Grey. It also doesn't help that her name's like, well, this is Cyclops and Wolverine, Rogue. I'm Jean Grey.
Just her name. It's just...
Which, I mean, in a real universe, I'm like, why are we coming up with the dumbest names that you could possibly come up with? Of course, we'd all be named Jean Grey and Logan Birkenstock or whatever the fuck his name is. The fact that they come up with these names and they're all like comfortably lying around in their X-Men suits, I'm like, come on, guys.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about Wolverine?
Oh, yeah. He was also on my nerves a lot. I can see how he would be charming if I was 10. And he's definitely more, I mean, it's helped that his character, I assume in the comics, is so well defined that comes through here as well. A lot more sniffing focus than I expected. As more familiar with the movies, he's always sniffing people out. Literally in the Nightcrawler episode, there's someone like looking around a doorway, and he's like, "What are you looking at, bub?" And I'm like, okay, I guess he smelled that monk come in, but I didn't mind him. He always had a toothpick in his mouth. I was like, I guess they can't really put a cigar in his mouth, which is understandable.
Children.
I was surprised though, at least in the early episodes, he is the most, you might see him the most in just like his street clothes, which is interesting. I don't know why. There is an ambition here that I do really appreciate. They are dealing with a lot of heady issues. I just don't know if they are always completely successful at knocking it out of the park. I mean, in that Jubilee episode, I mean, she has like surprising for the time, and even now, like a queer-coded sort of moment when she's listening to her parents sort of wondering what they're going to do with her. And she's like saying to herself, like, I didn't ask to be born this way. I'm just trying to live a normal life. And she sort of cries in the hallway. And I'm like, that's precisely what you're doing. I mean, that's very like spot on. I mean, Born This Way was already, even though I have to pay Lady Gaga 10 cents every time I say it, it does predate her. And I mean, it was something that would have been in the zeitgeist. And, you know, if we had Moms for Liberty then, we wouldn't have X-Men 97 now.
What's weird is you have to pay Lady Gaga 10 cents and then she has to pay Madonna 5 of those cents for copying Express Herself for that song.
It's a great system. It's called Trickle Up.
I go where I want to go.
Oh my!
I remember a lot of these quotes too, like every time you say it. Yeah, Wolverine was always my favorite as a temper tantrum having child. It was Raphael and Wolverine were my guys. Watching them now, I'm like, these people are insufferable.
Good, Raphael, go.
Get out of here.
Go, you're fucking on our nerves and we get more pizza this way.
I do think it's got marshmallows on it because this is the cartoon. I do think Wolverine has more depth and more kind of pathos in the comics. Obviously, there's more room to explore that. I think they do. It's thin, but they do a decent job of kind of showing, especially as we get later to Weapon X story, of like why he is the way he is, of just sort of like has this very torturous upbringing. And of course, they get into that in the movies too, where there's a reason why he doesn't trust anyone because he's been betrayed over and over and over again. He's lived forever, and he just kind of, you know what, I'll just handle this on my own. But he sees that these are trustworthy people, so he does his best. And this show doesn't get into all that really. It just kind of takes the loner part of it. It doesn't explain why, which is fine. I think there's only so much you can do in a 21 minute per episode cartoon. I do find it interesting. And I think this is from the comics as well. Like and they did this in the movies with Rogue, and Jubilee would be that sort of standing in the comics and in the series. He has a relationship with her that is closer than the other X-Men. Like he is very protective of her immediately. With Rogue? Sorry, and Rogue would be in the movies, and this is Jubilee. Oh. He's not exactly like immediately like come under my wing, but you can see that they have like a closer relationship, and I think that's cool. I mean, it's kind of cool. It doesn't cross any lines, okay? So don't even think about it.
There was a moment in the last episode we watched where Jubilee like embraces him when he was away. He comes back and she embraces him. Yeah. I was like, wait, what happened in the interstitial seasons? But I think it was just like a father-daughter moment. Yeah, or paternal. Yeah,
they just have like a close relationship, and I think it's because she comes in. She's our audience surrogate at the beginning of this, and she's like, well, who are these people, and why are they already? Why am I already wearing the yellow and blue, and why do they also have yellow and blue?
And why is my name Jubilation?
Yeah, this doesn't make any sense. And he's like, yeah, these are freaks, right? And he's also wearing the yellow and blue. I think that's a cool idea. You know, just the two. Anytime we can kind of explore these character relationships, like there would be, and if this were real life. What do you think about Cyclops while we're talking about characters?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think he is also kind of nebulous in this. You know, he's sort of, I mean, I'm familiar, of course, with James Marsden's portrayal. And I feel like Hugh's close in that he's kind of just like the all-American guy who leads the group. And he's kind of a, stickler for the rules. And he's getting it all.
He's the Boy Scout. He's the leader. Yeah. And he's the Leonardo. But he gets plenty to do in the episodes we saw. One of my complaints, and I don't know why he specifically bothered me, but the voice actor that plays him, which I don't remember his name, seems to be always shouting in a way that the others are not. It's really obvious later when we watched beginning of season 2 till Death Do Us parts 1 and 2.
Where he gets married to
Jean Grey, but it's Mr. Sinister tricks them and lures them siren style to some island. And
it seemed like a really convoluted plan because they're already together at the X-Men, compound. They're already here. You don't have to lure them separately to a third location.
Yeah. And I mean, we'll talk about this episode where
will we?
At the end. So Mr. Sinister's whole plan during this, I guess we'll just talk about this episode. We can come back to Days of Future Past because I definitely want to talk about
do you want to hop on Days of Future? I don't have much to say about Days of Future Past and we can just knock it out. Or do you want to keep...
Well, Days of Future Past, I think, is actually, it's in one of the most famous storylines. I think that and Dark Phoenix Saga, or just Phoenix Saga in general, like are two of the more like popular, famous storylines in comic history too. And they're really big in the animated series, and they've also been portrayed in the movies. So Days of Future Past, this was the other one we watched, which was parts 1 and 2. Basically, we get a glimpse into the future. This is 2055. We get an old Wolverine, and then there's this new character, Bishop, who is working for whatever the organization that was originally the mutant.
Yeah.
What was it called?
And they're running
mutant control agency.
Internment camps.
Yeah. And they're basically running mutant internment camps. So they're capturing things, but then they start turning on Bishop, who is working for them. And so Bishop comes to the side of the rebellion, which is Wolverine and this character Forge. Cyclops, Rogue, Storm, and Jubilee, they're all dead in the future. And so Bishop ends up going back to the past. In the comics, it was Kitty Pryde who like projected herself into the past. Yeah. It was a lot more complicated. I think it would be cool to see Kitty Pryde in this, but it's...
Oh yeah, we don't really see her. She's not in this at all. And any of the episodes.
I don't think so. They had a million cameos here and there, and I didn't catch them all. So she might be at some point. But yeah, so Bishop gets sent back to our present, which is, the 90s, and there's trying to stop an assassination, which is Gambit assassinates Professor X, right? Or is it?
Gambit assassinates Professor or Senator Kelly.
And
then that is what leads people to turn wholly on mutants.
But it's actually Mystique pretending to be, or, posing as Gambit. And so they prevent that from happening. And then Mystique is also Rogue's mom.
Yeah, and she's also, isn't she?
Nightcrawler's mom. Later,
she's also Nightcrawler's mom. Well, I mean,
Apocalypse is behind this whole thing.
Her blue, yeah, it's a mess. The only thing I wrote for these. Oh, I'm sorry. So we sent Bishop back, and eventually, is that the recap? We good?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. The only thing I wrote down on this is that at some point Storm is crushed by rocks, and Cyclops goes, "Help! Storm's claustrophobic." And I'm like, I also imagine she's made of bones and meat, so she doesn't want to be crushed by rocks. I couldn't tell if it seemed like such a weird line that I felt like. I think that's the show doing a joke, right? I couldn't tell. But the show is played so straight that it didn't feel like...
What was the show doing a joke? Her getting crushed by rocks?
When Storm is crushed by rocks and Cyclops' main concern is that she's claustrophobic.
That is not a joke. No.
Okay, because that's the last thing I'd be concerned about if someone was crushed by rocks.
I know it wasn't a story beat in the episodes we watched, but that was a story beat, is that Storm is dealing with her claustrophobia at some point. And so I guess it does seem like at least the second concern, if not farther down the list of when you have a bunch of rocks have fallen on you.
One of the things that I thought was weird, because we watched a few arcs in this series, and it reminded me of when me and Tyler have like a gift card somewhere. And Tyler's logic is like, well, we were already going to spend this money, so now we have a gift card, and we can spend less money than we even intended to. And my brain goes, no, now we have a gift card, we can actually spend more money and spend the amount we already budgeted.
Right. And we have
X-Men,
extra money.
When they have extra episodes, they just go, why don't we just keep cramming more stuff in here rather than like spacing things out and let things sit for a bit and actually like have a dramatic beat and a moment. Instead, they just keep packing stuff in. Yeah. So like when Bishop initially finds old Logan and he's bringing him to the concentration camps, he's like, they'll never hurt me even though I'm a mutant because I'm helping them out. They're not so bad. And then he gets the internment camp that he's apparently worked at for years, but we're still just 3 minutes into the episode and they're like, we don't need you anymore, mutant. And I'm like, do you want to just like have another moment here? so that, I don't know, you can see him working with these people, betraying his own kind. You just sort of want to, like, it just was moving at such a lightning pace. I'm like, why don't we just sit and have a moment in this future world? But nah, they didn't. They didn't want it.
They knew their audience were 7 and 8 year olds housing
fair.
a bowl of Lucky Charms. They don't have time for nuance. This is a really cool storyline idea. I agree with you. It's very sloppily done because they're just glossing over. They're just throwing stuff at. I can remember being like, I don't know exactly what's going on, but that is cool and I want the toy, which is exactly what they were going for and exactly what happened.
You were like, I need the Senator Kelly toy.
I need Bishop. I had Bishop. I had Nimrod, which is the future Sentinel, which is undefeatable until they defeat him.
He's all white and he's kind of got chunks on him.
Kind of face. Yeah, some of the character designs are not great. But that's pretty much. I also made a note on this that you already referenced was I love that they're just hanging out in the full uniform all the time. We get some cameos in this one too. I do want to point out that we see Blob and we see Pyro. We see
Blob
Avalanche.
is one of the assassins too, right? He's like,
there's I don't know. They just blow through him too.
His power is what?
Blob is
being fat.
Yeah, yes, and he can absorb stuff like blasts and punches and stuff. Like it doesn't really affect him because he can absorb it.
Yeah, I saw. Yeah, he gets punched and it doesn't bother him. Yeah, okay.
Eat plasma, renegade was a thing that Bishop says at one point, which is nice.
Great, perfect.
He also has
no notes. Keep going.
There's a child at one point, and Wolverine has it, and he goes, "This kid's crying. Do something." And he hands it to Jubilee.
that actually did make me laugh.
Okay, so that's it. Apocalypse is behind all this somehow, but we didn't watch the next episodes. So it was
funny.
How.
The end of the episode is Charles Xavier in his sweet ass hovering wheelchair. Hover chair, I guess. And at one point, his watch gets like magnetized to his car. I'm like, this is it. This is Magneto. And then it's like, and I'm like, oh, it's the next episode. And DJ didn't put that on my list, so I cannot watch it.
You've got plenty to watch. So
I did. That was my logic. I was like, he's probably going to show up again.
So we started to describe this a little bit. We go to season 2 episodes called Till Death Do Us Part 1 and 2. And
this is where you can complain about Cyclops. You can pick up your thread on Cyclops complaining.
Yes.
He's always loud. He's always yelling.
Seems like you want to talk about Cyclops. Go ahead.
No. I want you to.
There's a point at the end. So the whole scheme is that Mr. Sinister wants to capture these powerful mutants to Cyclops and Jean Grey specifically. Cyclops and Jean is just, that sounds so weird.
I'm Jean.
Scott and Jean.
I also have powers.
He wants to use their blood to create a master race of mutants that will then be his slaves. He'll control that master race. I don't know how he's controlling them, but he can't control these mutants. But he has his hench mutants, which are the nasty boys, which are a bunch of weird mutants. Hairball.
Yeah, Horatio Hornblower was one of them. Like he was just like screaming or blowing them.
Morph in his full Smeagol form is back. So Mr. Sinister found Morph in what happened in the first episode where Morph is we seemingly killed, but I guess they just left him there not dead. And then Mr. Sinister finds him and brings him back to life, sort of brainwashes him. And so he's working for Mr. Senator, but he keeps Mr. Senator. Weird name is Mr. Sinister did go on to be a senator, so his name was Mr. Senator Sinister. It was very weird.
Stop.
Yeah, he's very like, no, these are my friends. No, I must do it. It's very torture.
It's very exhausting, yeah. And I couldn't tell what the difference was, like what triggered him and what didn't. It just, if he had bags under his eyes, he was evil. If he, had a good pallor to his skin, he was fine.
I think it's a lesson for the children watching that sleep is important.
That's true. And, the importance of applying eyeliner, just don't rush it.
I thought it was the cool thing about it was Morph infiltrates the X-Men. And this is the first time he's seen any of them. And he causes all kinds of chaos. Like he pretends to be Rogue and kind of seduces Gambit and be like, hey, I'm going to go take a nap, but come in any time, which is like, okay. And then I do like the resultant Gambit. When Gambit finds out that Rogue didn't tell him that, Gambit don't never go nowhere he ain't invited. Consent.
I did see that. I was very happy for Gambit that he's like, I can get laid. Don't worry about it.
And there's at one point there's 2 Wolverines, and then Jubilee blasts the wrong one. Yeah, so I thought that was kind of fun.
I think this was the strongest for me because it felt most evenly paced, even though still a lot fucking happens and it's a low bar. But there was this, what is it? I only wrote FOH, but I can't remember what it stands. Friends of Humans? Fellowship of Humans?
Friends of Humanity, I think.
They're very Proud Boys-like. Yeah. In that they, they're talking about freedom and things like that. And they're just terrorists. They're just a small terrorist organization, just blowing shit up like Molotov cocktails, lighting things on fire, just going to bars where they know mutants will be and just like roughing them up, even though they're just playing pool and holding toothpicks in their mouths because they no smoking inside the bar. It's the 90s. And I thought that was very pertinent for our time. I thought it was an interesting corollary. And I also appreciated, on the same level, I do appreciate that correlation to future events with the Proud Boys, but I also appreciate that Morph at one point says, making copies, while rubbing his hands together. Also correlation for Rob Schneider's right-wing brand of comedy.
Did he say that?
He does.
Oh, wow.
He does
missed that. Wow.
It was one of the few lighthearted moments and pop culture specific moments of the X-Men.
It's weird what things you remember, because I've seen all of these episodes at some point as a child, but I distinctly remember I had like a sense memory when Mr. Sinister gets shot. He like kind of he has a hole and he kind of sloops back together, and it makes this really metallic sound. He's very kind of metallic looking, and I remembered that sound because it's a unique sound, and I was like, oh, wow. I don't know, it's weird. It took me back. But then we get Cyclops yelling, which he does almost all his lines, but he's really mad because at this point, not only has he faked a marriage and he's like interrupted their honeymoon, he's also like captured his friends and like attacked. And he's like, so you like playing God with mutants? Well, just keep away from my friends. Like, that's your line?
He thought of the God line and they didn't think of the follow through. It happens to the best of us.
Yeah. So that's that. Okay, do you want to talk about...
Wait, who is Horatio Hornblower? All these stupid mutants at the end. There was like this one guy who was dressed like Little Lord Fauntleroy in this little lavender, very old school, frilly outfit.
Those are the nasty boys.
And his power is blowing.
Yeah, there's the nasty boys. I don't remember what they're... I know there's Hairball. There's Slab. There's Gorgeous George. There's Ruckus. There's Hairbag. Mm-hmm. And there's Vertigo. There you go. Gorgeous George is the one I'm thinking of.
Gorgeous George. Okay, he did look like what straight men think gorgeous men look like. Like, long curly hair. I got it. I'm like, what?
Okay, we got to wrap this up. We're not even halfway through our episode. So,
okay. Phoenix.
Yeah. So, give us a.
Do you want to do your Phoenix or my Phoenix?
Well, your Phoenix comes first. So, and it does play into. So, you accidentally watched the Phoenix Saga, not the Dark Phoenix Saga, which is understandable.
I just saw the first thing that said Phoenix, and I was like, got it. Yeah. And I started watching. So in this one, oh God.
I can recap it if you want.
Let me give it a shot.
Yeah.
Charles Xavier is getting messages from a space entity, which causes him to need to get X-Men on a soon space launch that's happening in a few days. So they... wait for it, break into a government facility, NASA, and get themselves on the spaceship. Jean Grey uses her nebulous amount of powers to mind control everyone into thinking that the X-Men are the astronauts, but they're not. They're the X-Men, like I just said. And they get on the spaceship. Don't worry, one of the astronauts goes because he has to like fly the ship or whatever.
We need at least one of you guys.
There's a wormhole, and these very Star Wars-esque battles are happening all of a sudden. These other spaceships come through the wormhole, and one of them is, hold on, Lalandra, the Chiar, the princess of the Chiar. Shiar, which is She-Ra's cousin.
Yes.
And she apparently has a connection with Charles Xavier across space, not time, just space. And Jean Grey, for some reason, the spaceship gets all wackadoo, and Jean Grey's like, I gotta handle this. You go into this radiation-proof box that we have on the spaceship, but I'm gonna fly us directly into the path of this Chiar ship, which causes this radiation, gives her the Phoenix powers. Also quite nebulous. And she has to go into the hospital for moaning, and Cyclops stays by her side. Logan's like, I gotta go do something.
Because he also is in love with Jean Grey.
Because he's also in love with Jean Grey, and he can't be close to her. The Beast wears a Howard the Duck shirt at some point, and we find out it's Eric the Red is this villain who is named after a Earth Viking, but his name is Eric the Red. Don't worry about it. Why wouldn't he be named that? And he's sort of like the number 2 of this galactic prince who wants to take over the universe by getting his hands on the
Mcron crystal.
Mcron crystal, yes, Mcron crystal, and yada, yada, yada. He eventually gets the crystal, and he's using it to get the crystal powers. And if he opens this crystal, then the entire universe will be enslaved to him for all eternity or something. And he opens it, of course, and he's starting the process of enslaving us for all eternity. But Jean Grey uses her ever more nebulous Phoenix powers to reseal the crystal back up.
Then she flies it into the sun.
Oh, right. And she has to stay on the sun forever.
Yeah.
And Cyclops stands on a Scottish castle rooftop and cries while looking at the sunset.
Yeah. But
I feel like I covered a big chunk of the middle, but I feel like I got the two
You got it. So an important thing that I don't know if they talked about in the original Phoenix Saga, but they get into in the Dark Phoenix Saga is that the Phoenix is an entity. It has its own will.
They allude
and
to that,
it's like a demigod kind of vibe. And so it has inhabited Jean Grey and enhanced her powers and made her this very powerful thing. But for something happens between the Phoenix Saga and the Dark Phoenix Saga, which we didn't see, which is that now Jean Grey is like convalescing on Muir Island with Moira McTaggart, who has been introduced at some point we didn't see.
She's introduced. I mean, I see her in my episode too. Yeah. That's the Scottish castle at which we're at, which can support, by the way, the X-Men's plane on its roof. And I'm like, I don't know about that.
Well, yeah, she's got a lot of technology, so maybe she has some struts.
But wait, I thought Jean Grey was on the sun. Why is she coalescing in Scotland? Or
that something happened in the interim. She's back on Earth.
Okay, all right.
And she's like kind of fighting the Phoenix entity, and Moira is helping her, and Banshee is also there, he's like always
Banshee.
With Moira.
Yeah.
So somehow she's back, and then we also have this side.
Somehow
Jean Grey's back. We have the introduction of Dazzler, which Jeremy T. Powlen will be very excited about.
You know what? I'm thinking of, is there a woman named Firestarter or Fire Kicker or Fire like Mishy? Yeah. And she wears purple and she's always kind of voluptuous. A woman at work really loved her.
Dazzler is more of like a 80s, like short blonde hair, and she's got like a kind of leather jacket vibes with stars over it. She has basically... It seems like Jubilee's powers. It's almost exactly the same, except for they're they're like
Jubilee
sparklier, and she's an adult because she hits on Cyclops. So there's also where we get some more smell-based Wolverine charm because he's digging through the fridge and he said, "Where's that blasted salami? I can smell it." Which I can smell salami. Like that's not a mutant power.
That's not a power.
This is a really frustrating story because Jean is like convalescing, recovering. She's dealing with Professor Xavier's like helping her kind of like bottle up the Phoenix entity, which is just like sort of taking over her personality and her life. And then Scott is like, "Why won't she talk to me?" And it's like, "Hey,
she's sick.
Your wife is sick. Maybe give her a fucking second." So he's like, "I'm going to go to this club." And then he like sees Dazzler, and then Dazzler's like, "Hey, big boy." And he's like, "Nah, I'm good." And then they like go outside, and she's attacked by the henchmen of the Hellfire Club. The Hellfire Club is this whole new thing. And they're a group of mutants that is trying to find powerful mutants to control. So it's very similar, but in a different way to the Sinister Plan. And we get these fuddy-duddies. This is the inner circle of the Hellfire Club. We get Shaw, we get Sebastian Shaw, we get Emma Frost.
Oh, yeah, okay. I remember this from first day of school X-Men or whatever.
and others. And then they find out about
and the rest.
And then they find about so Cyclops saves Dazzler, and then so she's like, "Yeah, why don't you come back tomorrow? These guys are definitely going to be back." And he's like, "Okay." And then, yeah, it was very weird. I was like, "Send the cops or something. What is going on?" We get Beast with
a cab. Always have Cyclops there instead.
All Cyclopses are bastards, though.
That's true too.
And
they talk so loud.
I also wrote Beast has an Howard of the Duck tee, so this must be like either a continuation or he's still rocking that tee.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the Hellfire Club finds out about the Phoenix being part of that's taking over Jean Grey, and so now they want to get a hold of the Phoenix, and so now this whole thing takes place where the Hellfire Club gets control of Jean Grey's mind somehow with the help of Emma Frost, and basically it triggers the Phoenix to really want to explore these human emotions and to explore like being evil, basically. And so she becomes the Dark Phoenix, and it's in combination with the Hellfire Club, and it's very confusing. But then the X-Men try to save her, and eventually the Phoenix is expelled from. I've skipped a lot of things.
No, that's
it's
fine.
Expelled from Jean Grey's body.
I'm already annoyed with what you've described.
And the Phoenix is like, "Hey, that got weird, but we're cool now."
The Phoenix said this?
Yeah, they're like, Jean Grey is going to be fine as long as some of you all give a little bit of your life force, because she's dead at this point because she's been.
Oh,
and so,
yeah, sure.
And they're like, yeah, okay. So then the Phoenix is like, cool. So it takes some piece, 10% of 10 people's life force to give her 100%. So they've all got 90 and she's got 100. Great, Jean. Thanks.
I love when movies do talk about life force, because I'm like, what do you mean? Like, after a while, is it like when you take my blood, do I eventually like regain that life force back? Or am I always feel like I didn't get enough sleep for the rest of my life? Is that what you mean? What is that? How does that affect me?
It's a very video.
Or do I just die? Do I die at like 62 rather than 85? Like, what do you mean by you took some of my life force away?
It's a very like video game life meter way of looking at it. It's like, that's not how this actually works.
If little Mac hits me one more time, I'm going to die. That's how much my life force has been taken.
You're Mike Tyson in this scenario.
Right, of course. I want a mutant registry, and I identify with Mike Tyson. So here's my first note from my Phoenix saga, which is what I'll call it. So they break into a space launch, Cyclops shoots every astronaut, Storm assaults 2 soldiers, and DJ doesn't want a registry, is what I wrote. I mean, this is NASA. This isn't even like the army or the military. This is just like nerds in a space launch building, and we're just shooting them.
Well, we gotta. Okay, so I want to keep that for a big point, because I do.
Here we go, mutant apologist TJ here.
I want to get into that, but I think we got 3 more episodes to get through, and we are over time already. So, Nightcrawler is the next episode, which is Wolverine found Jesus. Is basically what happens. The Wolverine. Yeah. Rogue and Gambit go on a ski trip together for some reason.
In 1890s Germany, from what I can gather from all the clothes the German people were wearing.
I do want to point out that at some point, and I believe it was in the X-Men, the movie episode, I asked, what is your favorite X-Men sound? And we talked about snicked, which is, the sound of Wolverine's claws. We did not mention Bamf, which is arguably just as famous, or if not more famous, Nightcrawler's sound when he teleports. So
famous they made it into a national park.
Yes, exactly.
They named Bamf for his sound.
Badass Motherfucker Park is what it's called. So, His Honor the Mayor, that's for you. We get plenty of Bamf thing. We get a couple different sound effects for Nightcrawler's teleporting, which was disappointing because the first one was really cool. It was like kind of similar to this Mr. Sinister thing. Like it was kind of metallic and it's cool. And then they didn't use that every time. So it was kind of
is how would you have Bamf red? Bamf.
I liked it in the first sound effect they used. I
didn't catch it. This was an interesting episode in that it felt like it was dealing with a lot of heady stuff. In that Nightcrawler, to the show's credit, I know that he is a Christian in the comics, and that's something he grapples with there, and as well as Alan Cummings' portrayal in the
X2
movie.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting that a kid's show would be so explicit about God and Christianity. But it all felt very like, oh, we got to get through this so we can get to action sequences. And the action sequences felt very shoehorned in this episode. And that was another element where I started to lose my patience. I know, again, it's a show for kids, but they're at the ski lodge and Wolverine hears rumors that there's a demon that lives in town. And so he's like, I want to go down there and check it out. And so he decides, how would he get down there? Well, he'd ski down the mountain until he gets to the town, which is in much temperate climate. So I'm like, eventually you're going to have to deal with the transition from snow and ice to grass, which skis don't necessarily travel across as easily. Also, good point. What, are you just going to lay them by the snow line and hope when you're walking? Also, how are you going to get back up the
He's just
fucking
going to be
mountain?
like, don't touch my skis, bub. And everybody's going to be like, okay. That guy's got knives.
Jesus, dude.
Knives on his hand.
Instead of just having them ski down to the town, there's an avalanche because Gambit can't ski and he blows up a pine tree and it causes an avalanche. And it's so, and like, is this all just to get us to like blip to the monastery later on where they wake up in the monastery where, coincidence, Nightcrawler lives?
It was weird.
It's very convoluted.
Because they were like, weren't they on the way to the town? It's weird that...
Yeah, it was like the plot is already driving us in that direction. You just have a scene cut and they're there.
Yeah.
But it was kind of interesting because so one of the monks there, he's sort of been sheltering Nightcrawler, who's named Nightcrawlus, probably was his given name. Wagner. But there's another monk who hates him and thinks he is a demon and thinks that his presence has sullied the monastery. And then he incites the townspeople, much like 1930s Frankenstein, to charge with torches and pitchforks to attack the monastery. It's kind of interesting. It felt like if they could just sort of slow down for a minute, it might build to something somewhere. I just didn't know if the children's show had the tools to like manage the story in a satisfying way. It comes
down very pro-Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm not super into, but...
I liked it in terms of Nightcrawler's character, but then when it was like Wolverine and Rogue are all like moved by the gospel...
She's mad at Gambit for being like, so
dismissive of religion. It felt like it was very interesting for a few minutes to see a kid's show sort of grapple with the mystery of it all. And then it's like, but God's pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
I'm like, is he? I just watched a monk try and shoot an innocent man. What are you fucking talking about?
I do like the one line I got out of this was the monk is like, this Nightcrawler is my brother. And he's like, you guys don't look alike. And he's like, no, brother in the ecclesiastical sense. Nice. Weapon X lies in videotape. We've talked about this and it's fairly true to at least some of the comics in terms of that we get a little bit of a glimpse of Wolverine's origin story of how he was captured, put into this tube and adamantium grafted to his bones. But also a similar thing was planned for Sabretooth, and there's other characters in there, Silver Fox, and...
Yes.
What's the Maverick?
Sabretooth. And then Maverick was there and I was like, I hope he's been introduced before because I have no idea who this man is or what his powers are. He looks like he's wearing a Campbell's soup can on his head and a Folgers coffee can on his body. And I don't know if that really counts as a mutant power, but I guess they were all there together and sort of exposed. I found this really confusing. I couldn't really follow it. But again, I'll admit I'd lost my patience by this point, so I couldn't process what was going on.
Maverick reminds me of Captain Power. I don't know if you ever watched Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future. It was
No, I missed that one. Mostly because it seems like it was named by no one. It just sort of appeared out of nowhere one day.
I had Captain Power sheets.
I didn't get his name. The guy who was running this experiment has taken some of their real memories, then recreated them, like created little stage plays like Truman Show style, and has them like relive it in a way to control their minds. And apparently at some point they were all working together to accomplish things.
You train them as assassins, I think.
I found it very convoluted and I couldn't. It seems like maybe something that's explained much better in the comics where it has room to sort of flow naturally, and here it just felt very choppy and confusing.
Well, it's another example of so the solution to some of these things of like you have a limited amount of time, right, and you want to get this story, and they do make multiple episodes of arcs of many of these storylines, but not this one, but instead of sort of using that to explore characters, they use it to introduce more characters. And that's because of this sort of toyetic part of it, where they're trying to get more and more to it. And I had an Omega Red toy, which is the guy who, the big red guy who's only in like a scene that tries to like stop them. I think he's in more later or earlier. And then they've got Maverick and Silver Fox, and there's a lot of characters that just get thrown in. More importantly, we get my favorite line of the entire group of episodes that we watch, which is when Wolverine shows up to the facility and goes, "I got my bones here."
I said to myself, mine was a Delta Chi dorm room, but you got your bones here. Got it. I called this episode the episode.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Because that's all everyone seemed to be doing every few minutes. No! Grabbing your skull and screaming to the heavens. Or, if you want to play with it a little bit, you can grab your head and look down towards the ground. Either one. Actor's choice. Actor's choice.
Wolverine kind of had the Jean Grey disease in this one, too. He's like, like a lot of, you would spell it NNGH in comics.
Yeah, and then as quickly as it happens, they're all separated again, and Silver Fox flies off in her like flying Jeep.
Yeah.
I'm like, she just has this herself. She's not associated with a school for gifted students. She just has this machine. Okay. Sabretooth was there.
You can have it too if you ask your mom really nicely.
Yeah. I think you've actually nailed what is bothering me about it, is that I think you're absolutely right. It just kept, I think I'll talk about this in my verdict, but there is this effort to just keep introducing more and more characters instead of just playing with the characters we have at home and just making a story from these people we already have established and learned to love. You want to finish off on Graduation, or do you have more to say?
Well, I just wanted to say we do get just a tiniest bit of context, because in the video that's showing, it's the bad guy got Stryker or whatever his name is, showing.
They never say his name.
Showing the video journals, it's dated 1973, which I thought was interesting. So if we're in, at this point, the mid 90s, 96 maybe, 95, it's because it ended in 97. So we're like towards the end of the run here. So this is supposed to have taken place 20 years earlier, which is, I don't know, I just found that interesting. Some context, which we don't really get in the series, because understandably it doesn't really want to put it in a time and a place so much. But
well, I don't know. I mean, in the Days of Future Past episode,
that's true.
When Bishop comes back in time, he says, "I'm in the 90s."
Yeah.
I don't know why I did the Wolverine voice. I couldn't remember what his name actually sounded
I'm in
like.
the 90s, Cher.
Or what his voice sounded like. Wait, what? Oh.
He's a Norlish.
Gambit with the new, everyone's so like overwhelming with their accents. Both when Rogue and Gambit, they're always having scenes together because they're a couple, and I'm like, all right, regional theater, that is absolutely enough with this.
Are they a couple? I feel like it's a Pepe Le Pew situation.
I don't know. She's kind of flirty with him, but maybe it's a Sam and Diane deal.
I don't think she would be totally opposed to it, but she feels like she can't be in a relationship because they can't touch.
Because she can't touch, but you know what? Here we go. Segue. She's touched so many of us.
Oh.
Goodbye, my X-Men. Right. There is another Xavier.
So now we get to the real animated shit show.
Woof. Yeah.
This is bonkers. And I don't know if I've ever seen this season, because I do not remember this at all. The animation is completely different.
And the theme song is different. Did you pick up on that?
Yeah. And
it's more guitar, more. It's much more.
And it's bad. The animation is worse. It's more, it's hard to say, cartoony.
It's less detailed.
Yeah.
It is a little bit more detailed. There's not as many shadows or details on their faces. I noticed it specifically with Beast, because in the original one, he has the Wolverine haircut. Wolverine, will you just look at me? And he's got a lot of lines in his hair. And then he has these sort of furry sideburns that are sort of like drawn on with a lot of lines. In this, they're just sort of drawn on, just the outline of them are there, but there's no definition or hair follicles. So it makes it just look much more cartoony in that they are heavily outlined and less detailed.
It also felt, this might just been my streaming, but the audio quality was really bad on this in comparison. It felt just like cheaper all around. Which is saying something.
I didn't pick up on the audio, but yes.
Yeah.
It did feel cheaper all around.
So there's a debate happening as the mutant containment bill, which is basically all the stuff that we've been building up to since the very first episode is like happening. They're like considering this bill that would lead to X-Men, which we've been dealing with the whole series of like mutants getting rounded up, basically. You see a bunch of cameos of different mutants like watching this debate. We see a little clip of Colossus causing some sort of damage to a tank and on like some footage.
In some Soviet Union.
Yeah. There's a point where I can't remember the name of the character with the red mask. He's a acolyte of...
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask you about it.
Of Magneto. He says, Xavier gets attacked. He gets shot. And he says, Xavier is famous, rich, and...
Well, he doesn't get shot. The senator who's introduced in this bill, whose name I didn't get, he has like some sort of...
Yeah.
ray that he uses to...
That's right.
I guess identify mutants,
right.
But it also like sort of disables them.
Yeah.
And it causes like Charles Xavier to basically Xavier himself...
And
to his
everyone
almost
else.
his death.
Yeah. And so like everybody else is having like bad headaches, bad Xavier headaches.
Mm-hmm.
It's similar to what happens in the movie Logan. If anybody watched that, Xavier's older and he can't control his powers well. Like has this like episodes that like damage everyone around him. So
I just wanted to say while you're looking that up, I just remembered after we were talking about the animation, what happened from what because I looked this up. They thought season 4 was their last season. So that's what they drew to. And then they got renewed for another season, but their budget got cut and they had to sort of crank it out because they weren't planning on it. And so you'll actually, if you watch the first few episodes of season 4, it's still in the original style. And then it changes style because they brought in another animation team to help them crank these episodes out.
Okay. That makes sense. Sunfire is his name.
This is the guy. He looked like he had 2 pupils in his eyes.
He has the big red mask.
Could be correct? Yeah. But his eyes are like almost like Gambit eyes, but there's like a brown one and a red one sharing the same eyeball. The animation style made it so I wasn't sure what they were trying to display.
So Sunfire is the guy in the red mask. And at some point he says Xavier is famous, rich, and human looking, and he's still getting attacked. So we're all fucked, basically.
That was also a great point.
That was a really good point, and it shows like I think there is a decent showing in this cartoon of showing that there are I think the X-Men for the most part, with the exception of Beast and maybe Gambit with his eyes, like that are kind of can pass. You know, and then there's people that are not passing, and that's a very, common thing in terms of people of color, but also in terms of different kinds of sexualities. Like, can you pass, quote unquote, for whatever is, again, in quotes, normal, And I always find that really interesting whenever they dig into nuance. Now, they don't spend a lot of time on it,
right? But
I just thought that was a cool point. And then Xavier's going to die, and they start to kind of say their goodbyes, and they need to get in touch with the Shi'ar, Lilandra.
Of course.
And
because
Dr.
they have
Xavier,
a special connection which makes them in love.
Yes.
Which is covered in the Phoenix plot line. And that's when I really started shifting around in my seat. I hadn't lost my patience yet, but that's when I started like, oh my God, when are we going to get to the fireworks factory?
I kind of glossed over. I didn't really say this, but there's a whole thing with the Shi'ar in the Dark Phoenix saga where, Lilandra is the prime minister of the Shi'ar, and she
is princess. It's not princess. Even prime minister.
And she, is like, we have to kill the Phoenix because she's going to destroy everything. And Xavier's like pleading with her, and she's like, look, I love you, I have this connection with you, but I represent the Shi'ar. I have to make the best decision for both our people and the universe as a whole or whatever. And so
the universe where we all live.
That is a big bone of contention, and kind of like she's like, there will always be a part of me who loves you, but deuces. I don't know if this is the last time we've seen her since then, but at some point they're like, we have to get a hold of her because their advanced technology might be able to save Dr. X, but they're like, we need him to get a message to her. If we send a message, it's not going to get there for months, because she lives somewhere in the galaxy or in another galaxy or whatever. And so they use Magneto. They plead with Magneto, who's like leading a cult at this point. And they're like, hey, Magneto, I know you and Xavier have your problems, but you are friends and you can use your powers to amplify other mutant powers, which Okay.
Well, because they specified like that Charles Xavier's power is electromagnetic.
Sure.
And I mean, I also like, I think I went, pfft. I was very
too
interested
far.
though in Magneto because he's seeing this as his time to fulfill his plan. Like he's like, humans suck. We're the next stage of evolution. It's time for us to stop kowtowing to their needs. Let's take over. But he loves Charles Xavier so much that he's like, well, I this is the moment I've been waiting for, but I'm going to go help him say his goodbyes and get to another plane of existence. It was almost touching for a minute, and then I feel like the show kind of sunk it right at the end.
Yeah, because it's like Xavier's not doing well, and he's conscious, and so he starts doing. It reminds me of the bequeathing episode of Community when Pierce, played by Chevy Chase, starts being like, "I bequeath you this," and he's trying to like mess with them. Mm-hmm. Of course, Dr. X is not, but he like goes through each of the X-Men and says something nice, and like it's pretty sweet. It's pretty touching. Yeah, and then Magneto shows up and augments his power to communicate with Lilandra. She does, or augments Jean Grey's power? I don't remember. It doesn't matter. They get in touch with Lilandra. She shows up and she's like, he can, I can save him, but he has to come with me, and he can't come back for reasons. So he's going to live on in another
without his physical body. But I was like, what annoyed me about this, I was like, so you're killing him, but you don't officially want to kill him? It felt very, we just want to keep him in our back pocket just in case we want to use him again.
Yeah.
But he's going away. He's never coming back, but we're leaving the option open that he might talk to you in some way in the future. I was like, fuck off, Mufasa. Just get out of here. Kill him or don't, but don't do this weird thing. It felt very cheap. It felt like this is a great moment to go out on, have him die. He says these kind words. Charles Xavier, there's sort of a tenuous piece between him and Magneto. Great. Then Lilandra shows up. I'm like, I got a bunch of space stuff to talk about. I'm like, fuck off. I think I'll address that in my final points, but it suffice to say it felt shitty.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing that happens in like soap operas and, and the reason that comic books get a bad rap for this kind of thing, because they'll use, death is a very powerful thing to use. I mean, it's a powerful thing in life, of course, but it's a powerful thing to use in fiction. But you got to be careful with it, because it's like if you don't want to toy, it's like a Boy Who Cried Wolf kind of thing. Like if you're always killing off, a character, it's like people don't believe you after a while. Like, Superman's dead. Is he? No, of course he's not. He's back.
No, of course not. Well, just wait 2 months and he'll be back.
Yeah, and that's, comic books are known for that, and some of that is like kind of fun, but it's also like it really takes the impact away, which this could have been extremely impactful. This is a bonkers way to end a series, because it's still abrupt despite having this sort of conclusive element. They're still like, I'll always be there, and then it's like, you're like, what the fuck?
And it doesn't really resolve Magneto's story, because Magneto is sort of like, I'm going to put my global takeover on hold briefly to help my friend talk to his girlfriend who lives several light years away. She doesn't even just go to another school. She's from another galaxy. Sure, Charles. Sure.
She's from the Andromeda Galaxy. You wouldn't know her.
And her parents travel a lot. But yeah, this felt very abrupt, and it felt like, even though they thought their last episode was the end of the 4th season, it felt like, did they know their last episode was this one, or was there a plan to do more? I immediately watched the trailer for this rebooted, or whatever you want to call it, Disney Plus series. X-Men, and it seems like they're burying Charles Xavier, and it seems like it's going from there. Cyclops seems to be leading the crew, the gang, I call them.
Yeah.
So it seems to be building off of that, which I appreciate, because I'm now tired of the trope of like, okay, here are the movies you can ignore, and here are the movies you need to know for our specific reboot of the Halloween franchise. I'm like, hold on, I've got a pen and paper now. Which ones do I need to watch, and which ones should I ignore? So I do appreciate that they're taking their lumps with it, but as far as I know, actually, I don't know that for sure. I don't know. I know we're crazy over time. Do you have anything else to say about this episode specifically before we get out of here?
Not specific, but do you want to like hit big points, or do you want to do those in your
I'm
verdict?
just going to do those in my verdict.
Okay. Do you have any nominees?
Nominees.
I have a nomination for the Sally Field single scene award, and that was just Gambit talking about consent. Because that was really nice.
Well, actually, you want to just give it to Gambit for his consent? Give Catherine O'Hara to Gambit?
Sure. Because I do enjoy, he was the least obnoxious of the obnoxious accents.
Yeah.
Wolverine.
If we have to have an accent.
Yeah. Wolverine, who, not so much the accent, but his whole gruff demeanor he talks too much. It's just got too awkward.
For a loner, he does talk a fucking lot.
Yeah.
Because he's a loner, but he's also a fan favorite. And it's like, well, he's got to say something because he's always saying something funny, right?
He's always got something quippy, but nothing funny ever.
Yeah, I'll give it to Gambit too, but I'll add the note that it's a slow awards season.
All right, you want to go to the verdict?
Wait, but what's Sally Field? If Gambit's getting the...
So we can't use the consent scene. I got my bones here.
Well, that episode's so terrible that I don't want to give it to him. Do we have to give a Halle Berry award, or I haven't drawn the Four Hobbits award yet?
I summon the power of the Arctic wind.
Jeez, actually, that would be funny if she gets. Because I mean, all of Phoenix, but you didn't watch that episode, so it feels cheap to throw it in there.
So you like playing God with mutants? Just keep away from my friends.
Actually, can I give it to Beast for his stupid phrases?
Sure.
Beast. To quote Alyssa Edwards, you wouldn't get it, but it's funny to those who watch Drag Race.
Okay.
She calls Michelle Visage Beast, as in she's an ugly beast. Michelle's Visage is one of the judges of the show.
Jeez.
But Alyssa Edwards is very charming in how clueless she can be. And at one point she goes, Beast! about the Michelle Visage. And it's funny to me. And I find it funny. It's both of those things. It's funny to me, and I find it funny.
That makes sense. Would you like to go to the verdict of our show? Okay.
DJ, what's your verdict for this popular kids cartoon?
So you mentioned that they take a lot of big swings in terms of topics covered, and that is fairly true to the comics. They basically take things from the comic and sort of simplify them, and then to make things more complicated, there's a comic book series, which I think was X-Men Adventures originally, and then Adventures of X-Men, something that was based on the animated series and was the same thing happened to the Ninja Turtles, where they had an animated series that was based on a comic, then they have a comic based on the animated series that starts pretty much just like it, but then it has its own canon. And so it gets kind of confusing when you're asked well, is this like the comics? Was no, but yes, and then yes, but no. And because they simplify these pretty complicated, and one of the best things about X-Men in general, just the comics, is that it takes big swings on philosophical, political, interesting topics. And it does so through mutant powers, superhero bang bang, and it's pretty cool. It can be kind of thick. As a kid, I remember we used to, I mentioned in the intro, we used to make fun of it because it's just giant blocks of text. And I'm like, when are we gonna get to the fireworks factory? But it is pretty interesting, and you got to commend them from doing that. And they didn't shy away from that so much in this, but they did simplify it in a way that made it not make a lot of sense or have a lot of the sort of necessary pathos or character building that sort of goes along with that and makes that more compelling. They just kind of threw characters in, and so it makes it kind of sloppy, and it does make the concepts and the overall story arcs are still interesting. The Dark Phoenix saga, the idea that there's this sort of entity and that she gets turned and there's blah blah, that is interesting, and it was a fucking mess in the animated series. And so it's kind of both. And the characters who, I still think in the comics, Wolverine is everybody loves Wolverine. Wolverine, he's very interesting. He's a compelling character, and they kind of, it's not that way. And it's enough that the kids find it interesting, but watching it as an adult, I was like, it's not there. It's like a shell of a character. And that gets kind of frustrating. The animation can get kind of frustrating as we mentioned. It looks kind of cheap. It gets real cheap at the end, like you mentioned. The theme song's a pop. I gotta say, this is one of those examples where going back to it takes away from it. I don't blame my original self for liking it so much, because I think it's really cool. So I'm gonna say your inner child is not an idiot, but don't go watch it. Read a synopsis.
Just remember it.
Well, it's this is a children's show in the sense of it's better than He-Man, but it's closer to He-Man than I would like.
I would agree that it is better than He-Man. When you were describing the different lineages of comic books, I was thinking, so you have Queen Bees and Wannabes, and that gave us Mean Girls the movie, and then there was a Mean Girls musical on Broadway, and then you got a Mean Girls musical based on the play from Broadway, which is based on the movie.
Exactly.
Do you get it?
You get it now? There was a pamphlet that went out in 1983. Someone wrote a story about that pamphlet.
So while I was watching this, especially when I got to the Phoenix saga that I watched, I was reminded why I never really got into comic books. And it kind of ties into what you were just talking about, which is there are so many lineages and iterations of different stories because everyone wants to take their crack at iconic characters, like the big characters like Superman and Batman and Spider-Man. And you have to pay attention what adjective is being used on Spider-Man to know which comic book series this is. And once we got into Phoenix, I remember getting frustrated. There were so many characters.
Once we flew into Phoenix.
Have you ever flown into the Phoenix International Airport?
Beautiful this time of year.
It's terrible all times of year. It is my brother's, when he moved there, my brother said, it's kind of like Mordor if there was just a city in the middle of it. It's surrounded by mountains. It's hot all the time. Anyway.
Can't wait to our live show in Phoenix.
What it gets on my nerves is there are so many characters being introduced, and they don't all even seem to be in the same vein of concepts for characters. So once we got into the Phoenix saga, it was like, we've got space aliens. It was very Star Wars derivative. There are two galactic empires fighting with each other, and that somehow involves Jean Grey being in a Scottish castle for a little bit. And there's also, you've got Juggernaut, who just like comes into the story and disappears just as quickly. There's a Scottish mutant who has a staff that he shoots fireworks out of. No one's being given any names. No one's telling me what's going on. And I just started to feel lost. And one of the things I remember when I watched one of the later Avengers movies, I think it was either Endgame or Infinity War, is when I started to realize, like, there are no regular people involved in this story. Everyone in Avengers Endgame is a superhero, except for Gwyneth Paltrow's brief scene at the beginning where she's just saying, bye everyone, and then wanders off. But otherwise, everyone's either like Thanos, a supervillain, or a superhero. And I realized, like, all the stakes are kind of lost because everyone has these unique powers and everyone's got a unique backstory. And I don't know what we're trying to save anymore. And that's how I felt while watching this Phoenix story as well. Everyone was a mutant. So it made me wonder, why are we even bothering with a registration? It feels like you guys are 76% of the population because we haven't encountered a single non-mutant in this entire storyline. And I feel like X-Men's dynamic really works when there is that tension between the regular population, the Brotherhood of Mutants on Magneto's side, and then the X-Men on Charles Xavier's side, or whoever the villain of the week is.
Yeah.
And I think it is soap operas for little boys. It does feel like, even though stuff's going blammo, blammo, kablooey, schnicked, bamf all the time, it is just like convoluted mess. And if you miss one episode, you're like, who's that? Who's that guy? Who's this Scottish guy in robes? And it started to grate on me. And I'm reminded why I never got into comic books, because I think, once you have Norse gods and space aliens and rich playboys in iron suits all inhabiting the same universe, I start to shut down and turn off. I'm like, this is too far removed from reality for me to even connect with on a base level.
Yeah, I have the same thing where the more galactic it gets, the less kind of interested I am in it. And this, to your registry point that you were saying, also
lock them up.
One of the things that makes that hypothetical argument compelling is you have these characters that you know and you understand kind of where they're coming from. Whereas if you just have powers and costumes, it does make that less. And then they're constantly, for a kid's show, they're constantly using violence to solve everything. They're like, like you said, like punching just regular people that work at NASA, and you're like, what is happening here?
I'm just reminded in the Nightcrawler episode, Wolverine thinks that Nightcrawler is attacking Rogue, but he incapacitates Nightcrawler at that moment. And what Nightcrawler offers to shake his hand, And Wolverine then tries to stab him through the chest and only stops at doing so because Nightcrawler bamfs across onto the other side of the balcony. I was like, so wait, was Wolverine just going to kill this man who has said, I'm not trying to hurt anyone?
Yeah.
These are our heroes. Lock them up. I am just always reminded that it just gets really convoluted. I like my Superman in Metropolis. I like my Batman in Gotham, and never the twain shall meet. And X-Men is, the whole concept is, what if there's just infinite numbers of superheroes that just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing? And I'm like, nah, I'm out.
Like Batman and Superman, all of their moms' names are Martha. So that kind of
that's how you know a mutant's coming, is that there's a Martha who's pregnant.
Damon, I'd like to remind you that you still haven't actually given us your verdicts.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy you said your inner child is not an idiot, because I was teetering, and I feel like, just to be difficult, I will say your inner child is an idiot. I feel like this is really ambitious. There, just like you said, there are a lot of ideas here that are the beginnings of something interesting, but I feel like it gets lost in sort of comic book nonsense. And if you want to enjoy the X-Men, for my money, enjoy 2/3 of the original trilogy. And I feel like that has the dynamic, maybe that I just, because I watched those first, I'm expecting from X-Men, which is this tension between regular humanity and the interesting dynamics between Magneto and Professor X.
Once again, Damon Xanthopoulos, history's greatest monster.
Lock them up. I want names. I want the list of their powers. If it's just like, short-circuiting my VCR, that's one thing. If you can fucking scream and blow a hole into my chest or something, you're Juggernaut, you're just busting into Scottish castles, lock them up.
Did you read that one thing? Was it the Bill of Rights? Have you read that? Or
that's you know who could read it? Charles Xavier, when he's in my frontal lobe every other weekend.
What do you think, everybody? Email us, yourinnerchildisandidiot@gmail.com. You can text us or leave us a voicemail, 615-576-0525. You can leave us a voicemail. We'll play it on the show. We want to thank our friend Russ Weaver for the use of his song Top of Two for our ad music. We didn't do a problematic corner, but shout out to Jackson has an unhealthy obsession with Damon for our problematic corner. It's problematic, but not in a needs a theme song kind of way.
Jean's moaning was probably the most problematic. Oh, and her boob capsules on her suit.
Yeah. We want to thank our patrons for supporting the show. Thank you very much. We want to thank Little Miss Chicken Nugget.
Just Cuz.
Lindsay Halik.
T. Smith.
Arnar. Damon's Australian accent, bub.
Jeremy Powlen.
It's Heather Tuggle.
Oh, and now Masha Caroline Amberson. Is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Just everyone's terrible
Behold
accent?
the power of Zachary Hartley. Arctic winds.
Their Arctic winds will cool their ardor. I'm not doing that. Bill Haynes.
Shit on the cartouche, bub.
The zesty.
Travis Vance. That was my Sentinel.
Oh, yeah. David Mort.
Tommy Boy is my favorite movie.
Jackson
Damon's
has
favorite movie.
Yeah, that's true. Jackson has an unhealthy obsession with Damon.
Well, kiss my grits, the supreme ruler of this podcast.
James Taylor.
That was Nell.
It's true. This is getting out of control.
Speaking of Nell, Lindsay Nell.
Jonathan Day.
The Hands of Fate.
I'm sorry. I'm just realizing that we did a whole episode on a show called Nell, where I know we would have said Lindsay Nell's name and made no connection to it.
We're not smart.
We're like dogs. Once you take it out of my line of sight, I can't remember it. Hizoner the Mayor.
Particle Man.
Larissa Maestro.
Dr. Malcolm's heaving bosom.
Karen Curd.
Dramatically placed hot dog.
Captain Jean-Luc Picard. I will later play Professor X.
The elusive fan Gromkin.
Josh Frigo.
And Beth Surmont. Thank you all very much for your support. If you want to support like them, patreon.com/innerchild is an idiot.
Good. Wow. I like that Kirk-like pause for no reason.
I definitely did that on purpose and didn't just forget what I was saying in the middle. Down.